On the morning of his 31st birthday, the most feared young mafia boss in Seoul stood alone inside his private office, surrounded by silence that money could never buy away. The city celebrated the man who had built an empire before most people had figured out their lives. Newspapers called him untouchable. Rivals called him ruthless. Employees called him perfection itself. But while clearing an old cabinet that had remained locked for a decade, his fingers brushed against a small, dust-covered box wrapped in faded navy. Blue paper, he frowned. He had never seen it before, or rather, he had forgotten it existed. The tiny gift carried only one handwritten sentence. "For the day you finally have time to think about us." His heartbeat slowed. Suddenly, a face he had spent 10 years trying not to remember returned as vividly as if she had walked out of the room only yesterday. With trembling hands, he untied the ribbon. Inside rested a simple wristwatch, a folded letter, and a tiny baby shoe. His breathing stopped. The first line of the letter shattered every wall he had spent years building. "If you're reading this, it means I wasn't brave enough to tell you in person." At that very moment, everything he believed about the woman who disappeared 10 years ago began to crumble. But the truth hidden inside that letter would change his life forever. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to Physio Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. 10 years earlier. Before people knew him as the cold king of Seoul's underground business world, he was simply Kang Min-jun. At 21 years old, Min-jun had already inherited responsibilities that would have crushed most grown men. His grandfather had founded one of Korea's largest business empires. But behind the polished image of luxury hotels, technology companies, and shipping lines hid an organization feared across Asia. When his father suddenly became too ill to lead, every burden landed on Min-jun's shoulders. He attended shareholder meetings before sunrise. He negotiated with powerful investors during lunch. He settled internal disputes before dinner. His grandfather repeated the same words every day. Feelings are expensive. Weakness destroys families. Love distracts powerful men. For years, Min-jun believed every single word until he met her. Her name was Naya Kamani. She came from Kenya, having earned one of the most competitive international scholarships to study architecture in Seoul. Unlike many students who came from wealthy families, Naya worked almost every evening to support herself. She translated documents. She tutored children in English. Sometimes she even helped elderly shop owners clean after closing. She never complained. She simply smiled. That smile had a strange effect on people. It made exhausted workers laugh. It made lonely neighbors feel seen. It made strangers believe tomorrow might somehow be kinder. What nobody knew was that Naya carried quiet pain inside her own heart. She had lost both parents before finishing high school. Every dream she achieved came from sacrifice. She understood loneliness better than anyone. Perhaps that was why she immediately recognized it inside Min-jun. Their first meeting happened completely by accident. One rainy evening, Min-jun left an executive meeting later than usual. His driver was delayed. Without bodyguards nearby, he walked alone beneath the pouring rain toward another company building. Halfway there, dizziness overtook him. He had skipped breakfast, skipped lunch, skipped dinner. Again, his vision blurred. Before he could steady himself, he collapsed beside a quiet neighborhood cafe. Most pedestrians walked around him. Some assumed he was drunk. Others didn't want trouble. Only one person stopped Naya. She hurried toward him despite the heavy rain soaking her clothes. "Sir." No response. She gently checked his forehead. "Bernie, you have a fever." Min-jun slowly opened his eyes. "I'm fine." "You fainted." "I said I'm fine." "You can barely sit up." "I don't need help." Naya couldn't help smiling. "Good, because I'm helping you anyway." Before he could protest again, she pulled him beneath the cafe awning and bought him warm soup using the little money she had earned tutoring that afternoon. Min-jun stared at the bowl. "You shouldn't waste your money." "I didn't. You paid for this." "I invested." He looked confused. She laughed softly. "If you recover, then I made a good investment." For reasons he couldn't explain, that answer stayed with him. Nobody around him ever spoke so simply. Everyone expected something. Respect, money, influence, connections. Naya expected nothing. After finishing the soup, he quietly handed her several large bills. She immediately pushed them back. "You helped me." "Exactly, so take it. If kindness has a price, it stops being kindness." Meanwhile, life continued pulling Min-jun deeper into responsibilities that left little room for breathing. Yet somehow, fate kept placing Naya in his path. Sometimes he saw her studying in the public library until midnight. Other times she crossed the street carrying heavy art supplies after class. Once, he noticed her giving away her lunch to a homeless elderly woman before quietly drinking only water herself. Every meeting felt ordinary, yet every encounter disturbed the carefully controlled life he had built. Little by little, he found himself looking for her without admitting it. He began leaving work 5 minutes earlier, taking routes that passed her university, stopping at the same cafe. Not because he expected anything, only because seeing her somehow made the endless pressure feel lighter. Naya noticed too. "You've been here 3 times this week." "Coincidence. The waitress already knows your order." "Still coincidence," she laughed. He almost smiled, almost. Days turned into weeks. Weeks slowly became months. Without realizing it, Minjun started eating proper meals because Naya reminded him. He slept slightly longer because she scolded him whenever she noticed the dark circles beneath his eyes. She never treated him like a billionaire, never cared about expensive cars, never asked questions about his wealth. To her, he was simply an overworked young man who had forgotten how to live. For the first time since childhood, Minjun experienced something unfamiliar: peace. But what neither of them knew was that powerful eyes had already begun watching every meeting they shared. Inside the Kang family mansion, Minjun's grandfather had received photographs, one after another, every coffee, every walk, every smile. He placed the final photograph on his desk, his expression hardened. The heir cannot afford distractions. Across the room, Minjun's personal secretary lowered his head. "Should we investigate the girl?" His grandfather answered without hesitation. "I want to know everything." Meanwhile, completely unaware of the storm quietly gathering around them, Naya stood outside the university waiting for Minjun. She held a small shopping bag behind her back. Inside was a simple birthday gift she had spent nearly 3 months saving to buy. She smiled to herself. She had no idea that this tiny gift would remain unopened for the next 10 years. The following afternoon, the entire Kang estate buzzed with preparations for Minjun's 21st birthday celebration. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Business executives, politicians, celebrities, and influential families arrived one after another, each carrying expensive gifts wrapped in silk and gold. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom while musicians rehearsed soft classical melodies. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked powerful. Yet in the middle of all that luxury, Minjun kept checking the time. His grandfather noticed. "You're distracted. I'm listening." "No, you're waiting." Minjun remained silent. His grandfather slowly placed his teacup on the table. "A man who will inherit everything cannot allow one person to control his attention." Minjun lowered his eyes. He didn't argue, but inside, he knew exactly who he was waiting for. Meanwhile, on the other side of Seoul, Naya stood inside a tiny watch repair shop. She had visited the elderly owner nearly every week for 3 months, not because she could afford expensive jewelry. Quite the opposite. She had saved every extra coin from tutoring children, translating documents, and cleaning classrooms after lectures. Instead of buying an expensive designer watch, she chose something simple, a classic leather wristwatch. Nothing flashy, nothing luxurious, but she had carefully engraved one sentence on the back: "No matter how late life becomes, come back to what matters." The old shop owner smiled as he handed it to her. "You're giving this to someone very special." Naya smiled shyly. She hoped he'll wear it when he becomes too busy to remember himself. The elderly man laughed gently. Then he must be a lucky young man. She hoped he was, because inside her bag beneath the wrapped watch rested something even more precious, a tiny knitted baby shoe. She had made it herself during quiet nights in her apartment. Every stitch carried equal amounts of fear and hope. She hadn't told Min Jun yet. She wanted tonight to be perfect. She wanted to see his face before saying the words she had rehearsed 100 times. "I'm pregnant." Even thinking about saying it made her heart race. She wasn't afraid because she doubted his love. She was afraid because she knew his life, his family, his responsibilities, the pressure surrounding him. Still, she believed love deserved honesty, and tonight would finally be that night. As evening arrived, Naya walked toward the Kang mansion carrying the small wrapped box close to her chest. The mansion was unlike anything she had ever seen. Golden lights stretched across enormous gardens. Luxury vehicles filled every driveway. Security officers stood at every entrance. For a moment she wondered if she truly belonged there. Before doubt could consume her, Min-jun spotted her from across the ballroom. For the first time that evening, he smiled. Not the polite smile newspapers photographed, not the calculated smile investors admired. A genuine smile. He immediately excused himself from several executives and walked straight toward her. "You came. You sound surprised. I thought you might avoid this place." She looked around. "I almost did." He noticed her nervous hands. "Come with me." Instead of bringing her into the crowded ballroom, Min-jun led her through a quiet garden behind the mansion where no reporters could follow. The noise disappeared. Only soft lantern lights remained. Naya relaxed. "This feels more like you. It feels more like us." Those words made her heart flutter. For nearly an hour, they talked about everything except business. She told him about her latest architecture project. He admitted he had secretly started eating breakfast because she kept scolding him. She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. "You actually listened. I got tired of hearing you complain." "I wasn't complaining. You definitely were. I was concerned." He looked at her quietly. "I know." Silence settled between them, not awkward, comfortable. The kind of silence only two people deeply connected could share. Finally, Naya reached into her bag. "I have something for you." She handed him the small wrapped box. "It's not expensive. You didn't have to buy anything." "I know." He accepted it carefully. Before he could open it, one of his senior assistants suddenly rushed into the garden. "Young master." Min-jun frowned. "What is it?" "Emergency board meeting. Now your grandfather insists." Min-jun sighed heavily. He looked at Naya. "I'm sorry. Give me 20 minutes." She smiled. "I'll wait." He held up the gift. "I'll open it when I come back." "I'd like that." Neither of them knew those would become the most painful words of their lives. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere had completely changed. Several executives argued over an important merger. Foreign investors demanded immediate signatures. Min-jun's grandfather refused to postpone anything simply because it was his grandson's birthday. Hours passed. 20 minutes became 2 hours, then 4. By the time the meeting finally ended, the celebration was already over. The musicians had gone home. Guests had left. The mansion stood almost empty. Exhausted, Min-jun returned to the garden. Naya was gone. Only the small gift box rested quietly on the bench where she had waited. He picked it up. Faint smile crossed his face. "I'll open it tomorrow." His assistant approached. "Young master, your grandfather needs you first thing in the morning." "Fine." He carried the gift into his office and carefully placed it inside the top drawer, just until tomorrow, or so he believed. Meanwhile, Naya walked back to her apartment under the cold night sky. She wasn't angry, only disappointed. She kept telling herself he had responsibilities. He hadn't forgotten her intentionally. Tomorrow would be another chance. Tomorrow she'd tell him. Tomorrow she'd place his hand over her stomach. Tomorrow they'd dream together. But tomorrow never came. The following morning, Min-jun left before sunrise for an emergency overseas business negotiation arranged by his grandfather. His phone barely stopped ringing. Meetings replaced sleep. Flights replaced conversations. Every hour became another responsibility. He intended to call Naya. Then another meeting interrupted. He planned to visit after returning. Another crisis appeared. Days quietly slipped away. Meanwhile, Naya waited. 1 day, 3 days, a week. She called. No answer. She left messages. None were returned. She visited his office. She was politely told he wasn't available. Each rejection felt heavier than the last. She wasn't upset about the unopened gift anymore. She simply wanted 5 minutes. 5 honest minutes. What she didn't know was that nearly every message she sent never reached him. His grandfather had quietly instructed Min-jun's staff to filter anything related to Naya. Letters disappeared, calls were blocked, visits were denied, no explanation, just silence. The old man believed distance would solve everything. Unfortunately, silence often creates wounds that truth never would. Weeks later, Naya sat alone in a small clinic. The doctor gently placed ultrasound images into her hands. "The baby is healthy." Healthy. She should have smiled. Instead, tears quietly rolled down her face. She whispered to herself, "I wish your father knew." That evening, she made one final decision. She wrote a letter, not filled with blame, not filled with anger, only love. She explained everything, the pregnancy, her fears, her hope that one day he would understand why she couldn't keep waiting forever. She folded the letter, placed it back inside the gift box beneath the wristwatch, then added the tiny knitted baby shoe. She sealed the box once more. She believed he still hadn't opened it. She prayed he eventually would. The next morning, an opportunity arrived that changed the course of her life. One of her professors offered her a fully funded architectural research program in Canada. It included housing, medical support, and long-term employment after graduation. She stared at the acceptance letter for a long time. Leaving Seoul meant leaving the man she loved. Staying meant raising a child alone while living in uncertainty. For the first time in her life, love wasn't enough to tell her what to do. Standing outside the airport a few days later, she turned toward the city one last time. She placed her hand gently over her growing belly. "I hope someday," she whispered through tears, "you find the gift." Then she boarded the plane. Behind her, Seoul disappeared into the clouds, and inside a locked drawer in Minjun's office, a small unopened box waited patiently, unaware that it carried the truth that would change his entire life. 10 years later, the rain fell gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Kang Group headquarters, washing the glittering skyline of Seoul in shades of gray. Kang. Minjun stood silently inside his private office, now occupying the highest floor of the building his father once dreamed of leading. At 31, he had become everything people expected him to be. He was respected. He was feared. He was unimaginably wealthy. Every business magazine called him the youngest and most brilliant executive in the country. Employees admired his discipline. Competitors dreaded negotiating with him, yet those closest to him knew a different truth. Minjun had stopped celebrating birthdays. Every year he canceled every party arranged in his honor. Every year he spent the day working until midnight. No one understood why, not even he could fully explain it. There was simply an emptiness that returned every birthday, one that no amount of success could silence. His secretary had once asked, "Sir, don't you ever get lonely?" Minjun answered without looking up from his documents. "Loneliness is quieter than disappointment." The secretary never asked again. Meanwhile, the old Kong mansion was being renovated after years of neglect. Boxes that had remained untouched for a decade were finally being moved to the corporate archives. One dusty cabinet from Minjun's old office was delivered to him for review. He almost ordered it thrown away. Almost. Something urged him to unlock it one last time. Inside were old notebooks, university documents, faded photographs, and forgotten souvenirs from a life he barely remembered. Then his hand froze. In the very back of the drawer rested a small, navy blue gift box covered in dust. The faded ribbon was still tied exactly as it had been 10 years ago. His heartbeat became strangely uneven. For several long seconds he simply stared. Then he whispered a name he had not spoken aloud in years, Naya. He gently lifted the box into his hands. The paper had yellowed with age, but her neat handwriting remained. "For the day you finally have time to think about us." The words struck him like a confession. His breathing slowed. His hands trembled. He realized something that made his chest tighten. He had never opened it, not once. All those years he had carried the weight of believing she had abandoned him, yet he had never even looked inside the gift she had left behind. With extraordinary care, he untied the ribbon. Inside rested 3 simple objects: a leather wristwatch, a folded letter, and a tiny knitted baby shoe. His eyes locked onto the shoe. His mind refused to understand. Slowly, almost fearfully, he unfolded the letter. The familiar handwriting instantly transported him back to the young woman who always smiled before speaking. He began reading. "If you're reading this, it means I wasn't brave enough to tell you in person, or maybe life never gave us the chance." His throat tightened. "You always apologize for being busy, so I decided not to interrupt your dreams. I know the weight you carry every day. I never wanted to become another burden." A tear escaped before he noticed it. His fingers tightened around the paper. Then came the sentence that stole the air from his lungs. "By the time you read this, you'll probably know why I knitted the tiny shoe. I wanted to tell you that you're going to become a father." For several seconds, the room became completely silent. No thoughts, no movement, only disbelief. His knees weakened, forcing him to sit. He reached for the letter again with shaking fingers. "I don't know if you'll be happy or afraid. Honestly, I'm both. But when I imagined our little family, I wasn't scared anymore." More tears blurred the words. "If something happens and we somehow lose each other, please never think I stopped loving you. I loved you before you became powerful, and I would have loved you if you had owned nothing at all." Min Jun covered his mouth. His entire body shook. For 10 years, he had believed she simply chose to leave. Instead, she had left carrying his child. A child he had never known existed. His breathing became uneven as memories crashed into him one after another. Her nervous smile that birthday, her trembling hands holding the gift. The way she had looked as though she wanted to say something important. Every forgotten detail suddenly made perfect sense. Then another realization hit him. Someone had kept them apart. This wasn't an accident. He immediately called his oldest employee, Mr. Han, who had served the Kang family for more than 30 years. Within minutes, the elderly man arrived. When he saw the open gift on the desk, his face turned pale. "You remember this," he whispered. Minjun slowly raised his eyes. "You knew." Mr. Han lowered his head. "I prayed you would never discover it this way." "Answer me." The old man remained silent. "Did you know she was trying to reach me?" His silence became the answer. Minjun's voice broke. "Did you know about the baby?" Mr. Han's eyes filled with tears. "I found out only after she had already left." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Because he stopped. Minjun stood. "For once in your life, don't protect anyone. Tell me the truth." The elderly man closed his eyes. "It was your grandfather." The room became still. "He believed Miss Naya would destroy your future. Every letter she sent was intercepted. Every phone call was blocked. Every visit to the company was denied before it reached you." Minjun could barely breathe. "The overseas business trip. He arranged it to separate you. My messages never reached her. My calls, she never received them." "My God," Mr. Han nodded sadly. "She came to this building many times. She always carried hope when she arrived and heartbreak when she left." Minjun staggered backward until he leaned against the window. He remembered believing she had stopped loving him. Meanwhile, she had been standing outside his office, waiting. "Alone, pregnant," he whispered through tears. "She thought I abandoned her." Mr. Han nodded once. "And you believed the same about her?" A decade of misunderstanding collapsed in a single afternoon. For the first time since becoming head of the Kang family, Minjun cried openly. Not as a businessman, not as a mafia boss, simply as a man who realized he had lost 10 irreplaceable years because of silence. After a long time, he wiped his face. "Where did she go?" Mr. Han hesitated. "I only know she accepted a research program overseas." "Which country?" "Canada." Minjun immediately ordered his global legal and corporate teams to search every international branch, scholarship record, architectural association, and immigration databases companies could legally access. Days passed, nothing. Weeks passed, still nothing. It was as if Naya had disappeared from the world. Then, one quiet evening, while looking through the envelope again, something slipped onto his desk. A faded photograph. He had overlooked it before. It showed Naya standing beside a half-finished wooden sign outside a small community center. On the back, written in tiny handwriting, were the words, "If life ever separates us, look where people build homes instead of empires." Minjun stared at the sentence for a long time. Then something caught his attention. In the corner of the photograph was the logo of an international humanitarian architecture foundation. He immediately searched his company's old partnership records. One file appeared. A foundation that specialized in designing schools, orphanages, and affordable housing. Across East Africa and Canada. His pulse quickened. There, buried deep in an old annual report, was the name of one of the lead architects, Naya Amani. And beneath her name, one line changed everything. Director of Children's Community Housing Initiative. Children. His heart pounded. Was she there alone? Or had she spent the last 10 years raising the child he never knew? Minjun did not sleep that night. The faded photograph lay on his desk beside the tiny baby shoe, the wristwatch, and the letter he had now read so many times that he could almost recite every word from memory. For 10 years, he had measured success by the companies he acquired, the contracts he signed, and the respect he commanded. Now, none of it mattered. There was only one question left. Was he already too late? At sunrise, he boarded the first flight to Canada. His assistants tried to arrange meetings with business partners while he was abroad. He canceled every one of them. His grandfather's old philosophy echoed in his mind. Business comes first. For the first time in his life, Minjun chose something else. Love came first. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Nia stood outside a bright community center surrounded by laughter. Children ran across a playground she had helped design from the ground up. The building wasn't luxurious. Its walls were simple. Its gardens were modest. But every corner had been created to make children feel safe. That had become her life's purpose. After arriving Canada 10 years earlier, she had completed her studies with distinction. She stayed because she found work that gave her peace. Instead of designing skyscrapers for billionaires, she built homes, schools, and community centers for families who had nowhere else to go. People often asked why she chose such a difficult path. She always answered with the same gentle smile. Because everyone deserves a place that feels like home. What no one knew was that every home she designed carried a quiet wish. The wish that one day she might have the courage to return to the place where her own heart had once lived. Inside the community center, a cheerful 9-year-old boy carefully arranged books on a shelf. He had his mother's warm smile, but his sharp eyes and calm expression looked remarkably like someone else. "Mom," he called, "I finished organizing the library." Nia looked over and smiled proudly. "Thank you, Kellen." Kellen Amani, the greatest gift life had ever given her. He had grown it. Thoughtful, kind child who loved drawing buildings almost as much as she did. He often asked about his father. Nia never lied. She simply said, "Your father is a good man who never had the chance to know you." She refused to let bitterness shape the story because deep in her heart, she never truly stopped believing in Minjun. Back in Seoul, she had cried enough tears for both of them. Now she chose peace instead. That same afternoon, a black car quietly stopped outside the community center. Minjun stepped out slowly. For several moments, he couldn't move. The building before him matched the one in the faded photograph. Children laughed in the distance. Flowers swayed gently in the breeze. It looked nothing like the world he had spent the last decade ruling. It looked alive. He walked toward the entrance. Every heartbeat felt louder than the last. Inside, volunteers greeted him politely. "Can we help you?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm looking for Nia Amani." Volunteer smiled. "She's in the garden." Minjun thanked her and walked outside. Then he saw her. She was kneeling beside a flower bed with several children helping them plant new roses. The sunlight caught her face. She looked older, wiser, more peaceful. Yet the kindness in her eyes had never changed. Minjun stopped walking. His throat tightened. For 10 years, he had imagined this moment countless times. None of those dreams prepared him for reality, almost as if she felt someone watching. Nia slowly turned around. Their eyes met. Time seemed to stand still. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. The world around them disappeared. Finally, Minjun whispered the one word he had carried in his heart for a decade. "Nia." She stared at him in complete disbelief. The gardening gloves slipped from her hands. Tears instantly filled her eyes. His own tears followed. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words carried 10 years of regret. 10 years of unanswered questions. 10 years of longing. Nea slowly walked toward him. When she finally stood before him, neither reached out at first. There was too much history between them, too much pain. Minjun lowered his head. "I opened the gift." A single tear rolled down her cheek. "It took you long enough." They both laughed softly through their tears. It was the first laugh they had shared in 10 years. "I thought you left because you stopped loving me," Minjun confessed. "I thought you chose your family's world over ours," Nea replied. "I never knew." "I know, my grandfather," she gently nodded. "I figured it out eventually." "You knew, not at first. But after years passed, I realized someone had been keeping us apart." "Why didn't you come back?" She smiled sadly. "I almost did many times. What stopped you?" She looked toward the playground. "My son needed stability more than I needed answers." The word son echoed through Minjun's heart. He followed her gaze. Kellen was helping a younger child tie a shoelace. His gentle patience looked so familiar that Minjun's knees almost gave way. Nea turned back to him. "He doesn't know you're here." Minjun's voice trembled. Does he know about me?" "I've always told him his father is a kind man. You never hated me." She shook her head. "I was hurt." A pause, "But hate and love cannot live in the same heart forever. I chose love." Minjun quietly wiped his eyes. "I don't deserve that kindness." "No," she smiled softly. "You don't." Then, after a long silence, she added, "But people can grow." Those words broke the last wall around his heart. For the first time in years, Minjun allowed himself to hope. Just then, Kellen noticed the unfamiliar visitor. He walked over curiously. "Mom," Nea knelt beside him. "Kellen, there's someone I'd like you to meet." The little boy looked politely at Minjun. "Hello, sir." Minjun could barely answer. "Hello." Nea placed a reassuring hand on her son's shoulder. "This is the man I told you about." Kellen tilted his head. "My father." Silence. Then Minjun slowly nodded, unable to speak through his tears. The boy studied him for several long seconds. Instead of anger, he smiled. "You cry a lot." Minjun laughed through his tears. "I guess I do. My mom cries when she's happy, too." Without thinking, Kellen stepped forward and hugged him. It was a simple child's embrace, but to Minjun, it felt like getting 10 years of life back in a single moment. He held his son carefully, as though afraid the moment might disappear. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. Kellen looked up. "For what?" "For missing so much." The boy thought for a moment before answering. "You're here now." Children often said the simplest things, and sometimes the simplest things healed the deepest wounds. Over the following months, Min-jun chose a different life. He didn't abandon his responsibilities. Instead, he changed how he carried them. He appointed trusted executives to handle work he once refused to share. He spent weeks at a time in Canada with Naya and Kellen. Eventually, he established a charitable foundation that partnered with Naya's organization, funding schools, children's homes, libraries, and affordable housing in communities that needed them most. Not because he wanted recognition, but because Naya had reminded him of something he had forgotten long ago. Success means very little if no one feels loved because of it. One quiet evening, they returned together to Seoul, not to relive the past, but to make peace with it. They visited the old garden, where Naya had handed him the small wrapped box 10. Years earlier, Min-jun looked at the wristwatch now resting on his wrist. It finally found its owner, Naya said. He smiled, and it reminded him what matters. He gently took her hand. This time, he didn't let go. Sometimes life doesn't break two people because they stop loving each other. Sometimes it breaks them because fear, silence, and pride speak louder than their hearts. But real love has a remarkable way of waiting. Not forever, not without scars, but long enough for the truth to find its way home. The greatest gift Naya ever gave Min-jun was never the watch. It wasn't even the tiny baby shoe. It was the chance to become the man he should have been all along, a man who finally understood that love is not measured by wealth, status, or power, but by presence, trust, and the courage to choose the people who matter before it's too late. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from and comment your favorite moment below. Like this video and subscribe to Ephesial Threads for more emotional mafia love stories. Please like and subscribe to Afro-Korean-Wave. Wait for the next story. Subscribe.